Hello and welcome to Neuromentoring. We are so glad you could join us.
I'm Lucy.
I'm Brian.
Together we explore what mentoring is in these neurodiverse spaces we call universities. Today's topic is mentoring breaks and breakdowns.
Lucy, oh Lucy, when did you last have a proper break?
On my master's degree about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, that's not break and rest in any shape or form, is it?
No, I have had smaller time, I've had periods of rest, but I wouldn't say that it's a proper break. So
Okay, so my last break was, well, I had 2 weeks off around Christmas time. And that did me well. I do find though, I had 3 weeks off, and I made sure I had 3 weeks off for a really good reason, which is the first week I need a week off to just get my head around having time off.
it's breaking that routine, isn't it?
Yeah,
And getting your headset, almost putting on a different hat is how I describe it to some of my students. Sometimes I say to my students, you've got a student hat, you've got a home hat, and if you're working, you've got an employee hat. So you have many different hats that you have to transition from, obviously using the analogy of routine and lifestyle. And that works quite well. But I will tell you, Brian, for the first time in 2.5 years, I have scheduled 2 weeks off at Easter.
fantastic.
Progress.
Yes, I'm very, very proud. Just you talking about hats, I'm sure that one of the hats that I have to wear is a wizard hat. I'm very good at the wizard hat.
Go
It
with
is
beard.
Yeah, so it's that kind of thing where we have to sort of move from role to role. And the role of rest is something we just don't talk about. We see it as something inferior, something just to be looked down on, something that isn't productive. Oh, I hate that phrase. I hate it with an absolute passion.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Rest isn't very often a priority. You have to
No,
choose to prioritize rest.
yeah,
It's not something in today's society that comes culturally anymore.
no, no. It used to be that, say, reading week, you didn't actually do any reading and just had it off. Maybe
Yeah,
this was me in the 90s. Now, reading week seems to be the panic to do all the stuff that hasn't been done because there isn't enough space in the rest of the term.
100%. Even when I was doing my undergraduate degree in 2014, reading week in the first and second years, perhaps maybe that's the typical, they were just weeks off. But by my third year, I felt, okay, the mental needs to pick up. I need to use this time productively, actually underlined and in bold. And it never actually was conducive to rest. And
Yeah,
I never felt refreshed, and I felt like the chaos continued. But a week's not long enough for a neurodivergent
exactly. Yeah.
person. It's not. You need you need that time to, like you say, settle into rest and the habit of rest.
To rest, have time for rest, but also during reading week, have time for reading. And the number
Yeah,
of students I've talked to who find a writing week, something where they have to have some sort of output rather than to sort of sit back into the knowledge of your subject, to
yeah.
immerse yourself in it and pick up a good book to challenge the way you think, which I think being challenged in the way we think is a kind of rest. But there's lots of people that argue with me, particularly the people who I try and challenge their thoughts on. So the week before the rest, the week to settle into the rest, what do you do to settle into your rest?
For me,
Mm,
I like to get my ducks in a row. I like to have a reset environmentally. So I like to have everything clean, tidy. Actually, a part of that process for me is organizing drawers.
yeah,
It's organizing visual clutter, organizing stuff that has been put on a not urgent list.
yeah.
And once I've established that, I then give myself permission to rest.
I love the idea of having rest within order, that rest itself is not a devolving into chaos.
My profile of ADHD, my ADHD likes color, craziness, wow, chaos. But my autistic brain, that element of it inside me, cannot cope working like that. And cyclically, my desk is the perfect example of that. I'll have 3 days maximum of my desk being chaotic before I have to have it reset when I finish my workday, ready for the next day. And that's kind of like a micro vision of really what the rest onset process is for me. I have to have things tidy and organized and feel in control to allow myself to rest.
So, there is some philosophies out there. I think I'm going to get my Heidegger and Hegel's muddled up between
Okay.
being and doing. But
Yeah.
actually, there are times we are because we just are, and there's times we do stuff because that then gives us a role to reflect upon our actual being as such. And actually, it's that how do we switch between the two? Because I think we need both. We need rest as doing, and we need rest as being.
Yeah.
Again, this might be a hunch. So this, when you're doing this, cleaning this, tidying this, ordering, does that ever get in the way of the actual rest itself?
No.
Oh, tell me more.
Um, so I recently came across the phenomenon of the 7 types of rest. And I very much believe in it, advocate for it. So it was actually coined by Dr. Sandra Dalton-Smith. She did a TEDx Atlanta talk in 2021. So she says there's physical rest, mental rest, sensory rest, creative rest, emotional rest, social rest, and spiritual rest. Now, most people would assume physical rest meant, oh, sleep, sitting still, resting. No. Physical rest can be passive, it can be active. And for me, with my profile, I know that sleep and passive rest is not enough. I need to move my body. I need to balance balance the um balance the benefits of both. And I think, especially in a world where mentoring has now become very remote, I think it's important. It's very important to me as somebody who predominantly works remotely. Then you've got the mental rest. Now, that could look in many different contexts, in different ways, but I'm going to refer to it in the sense of what I know in the industry that I'm in. So taking short breaks, don't, see students back to back for 4 hours. Take short breaks in between to A, come away from the computer sensory wise, but B, to just have a little bit of mental reset before you then go into the next session, giving yourself that time and space. And that is one example that was given, along with also the art of brain dumping and having an outlet, especially if you're neurodivergent and you're processing all these things at the same time, having an outlet to just logically illustrate your thought processes in black and white. And there's no right or wrong way to brain dump. But I tell you what, it's revolutionized my sleep.
It is, and just having that thing. So I do my brain dump via Siri, and I'm going to say this, knowing that we're recording on Max. I say, "Hey, magic word," and when magic word hears that I've asked her to take a note, I can then just drop it there. I will also tell you, I don't very often go back to look at those notes, but I'm glad that they're done. So, and they come out in two forms. There's either the weird idea that I've just had, or there is the thing I need to do. And then I do, hey, magic word to remind me at a certain time. Because
Yeah,
otherwise, if I'm not reminded at a certain time, it will get lost into the ether forever.
absolutely.
And it stops
So
me having to think about it. Yeah,
definitely. Then that leads on to sensory rest. Now,
that's right.
we all live in a high demand society and culture in the West. We live in a world where we're on demand all the time. We need to take physical rest. Now, I know as somebody that has blue light filters on my glasses, I am bothered by blue light. I work remotely. So I know, and I'm now mindful, having come across this 7 types of rest, how important that visually I need to take breaks from the screen. I need to take, regular 5-10 minute breaks from the screen, especially if I've got back-to-back bookings and things like that. But implementing a 5-10 minute shift in session time just gives me, usually it's actually 15 minutes, gives me that space to meet not only my mental needs, but also actually sensory, because I am somebody who is very visually sensitive to bright lights. I'm one of those people that's a lamplight person, not a ceiling light person.
Oh, I understand entirely. Just to chuck in that from research, in 1976, there was well, it's a horribly written piece of paper because it really does sound of its time for autism, but actually it does talk about the stress, anxiety that is caused by fluorescent lights. Yet most schools and quite a few higher education places still have big glaring fluorescent lights that if you can see the flicker, you can only see the flicker. And yeah,
Absolutely.
that's, yeah, I was 8 months old when that piece of research came out, and I'm now really old. Well, we still haven't changed. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
I get
and it's
grumpy.
surprising given how many higher education institutes claim that they're universal design conscious and they're working towards, and they have universal design in their development programs. But how often does that translate? Not very often. The amount of my students that have to come home at their lunch break or at some point in the day to decompress, especially if they've got a long day with the lights. Yeah, absolutely. It's very much still an issue.
While we're going down there, comfy seats in lecture rooms. Oh no, they might fall asleep. Actually, if you've got students falling asleep, that's probably because you're boring.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Or
Yeah.
they've actually got other things going on in their life. They're not getting enough rest.
Yeah.
And there's a lovely book called Everything You Know About Education Is Wrong, which really does advocate for learning with naps. And actually,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that there's an awful lot of research that actually, if we could have universities where we can sort of wander out of a lovely enriched lecture to a quiet place where we can close our eyes for a few minutes, then, well, I will tell you, I do like, and I don't like singling out particularly universities, but this one I will do. Birmingham University's library, their postgraduate space has these lovely big pods, and you can go up to the library, or you used to be able to, and get a blanket. And you can sit in these pods and charge your phone and fall asleep for 45 minutes, which is what I did on a fairly regular basis. Sometimes it needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do. Well, I'm not. I can't apply this blankly, but blanketly. But I have seen in schools a similar approach, and I often work with students to find a location for them to do that on site, to decompress on site.
Exactly.
What's
And
possible?
yeah,
But
have rest, have a nap.
we don't normalize that as much as we do in a school environment. Why
Mm,
is that? Why
yeah.
is that? You know?
What one of my earliest memories is in preschool kind of stuff, having the enforced nap. Now, didn't suit me very well. I don't have the mentality to sleep when I'm told to, but I like the fact that it was a normal thing.
Yeah.
So we've talked about physical rest, not just sleep, maybe going for walks and stuff. I would love to go on a walking holiday. There's a thought. You've talked about mental rest, that idea of brain dumping stuff so you can come back to it later using reminder apps to come back. Sensory stuff from the big bright world. What was next?
So this is my absolute favorite form of rest. And for me, is actually the most important for my well-being. Creative rest.
Is
Now,
that a rest from creativity or a rest to be creative?
either or.
Ooh, tell me more.
So how Dalton-Smith sort of framed it in the talk was people that have to be brainstormers, people that have to be problem solvers, ding, 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 mentoring.
Yeah.
They are the people that need the creative rest the most. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you need to go out and, paint. You don't need to go out and perform in a drama production. But if they're for you, things that fuel your batteries, great. For me, sometimes creative rest is going out on a walk around a lake and noticing textures, noticing what wildlife is around, creating a space that creates wonder and awe that's not prescribed, not demanding, and that allows free expression, that allows you to interact with things that perhaps aren't defined by rules. And for me, that's especially important. As somebody who loves rules, oddly, the ADHD inside me needs no rules sometimes. And creative rest is exactly that. And that's why I love paper-based creative art. So I do bullet journaling, I do creative journaling, I do memory planning, and they all involve me ripping pretty bits of paper up and putting washi tapes down, photos, printing off quotes, and just creating a picture that visually has no rules. It's not neat and tidy, But because it's all a similar, I usually do it around colour theme. I'm somebody that thinks in colour, basically. Letters and numbers have colours. That's perhaps a conversation for another time. So for me,
That's a brilliant conversation for another time.
I love that I can create a spread that might be, I don't know, give you a random example. There might be Derry Girls, which is one of my favourite shows at the moment, themed. I might print off Derry Girls and I might have greens and reds and blues based on their uniform. And then I'll put like different, it's just lovely because there's no rules. And as somebody that loves rules, it's bizarre that I love something that has no rules whatsoever. So for me, creative rest, and it's something that I can grab. If I have a student that's cancelled and there's a change in my schedule, I can grab my journal and do a spread. And it's good fun. And then for the rest of the day, I've got this burst of energy that perhaps mentally I didn't have before. So for me, creative rest is so, so important. It might be adding a few more bricks onto my latest Lego set, or it might be printing off stuff for my doll's house. It's allowing my imagination to be free for me, that's outside of my problem solving and brainstorming for my students. So I love creative rest. Don't know if I've said that,
Oh,
more than
it's fantastic. And I'm thinking about it. I've never thought about rest in these kind of categories before. So I was sitting there thinking, actually, what creative rest do I do? And I suddenly realized what I do almost every day is I just get my ukulele out and I sing usually punk songs on a ukulele. It's woo.
brilliant.
It does it exactly for me. I like taking the things that shouldn't be nice and twee and making them nice and twee in an act of rebellion. And actually, just as I say that out loud, I think my acts of rebellion are creative. I love a good protest because I feel that there's something about creating good in the world. And that's one of the things that sort of inspires me to move on. Yeah, the idea of creativity, and I'm going to chuck rebellion in there as well, just because I always do. I love creative rest, and I think I'm good at it, and I've never realized I'm good at it until you told me about it.
I think for me it's really important. And there'll be different people at different times. And I think that's
Mm,
what's important to remember. Different types of rest
yeah,
will be more a priority at different times. So quite often for me, creative rest comes at a time that I need physical rest. And it's not the physical rest where I'm pacing or I am sat down or I'm taking, my time on things. Sometimes my brain needs the mental stimulation from the endorphins from exercise in combination with the dopamine from the creative rest. And quite often for me, those two are really, really important for my well-being. But at another time, it might be that I need spiritual rest and social rest. There's no right or wrong way to apply it, but I think I love the science of it and the theory of it, the framework of it.
yeah. So, here's the thing is I know as a researcher ideas change, and the 7 kinds of rest, it might not be true, but it's useful true. It's a
Yeah,
really good way of looking back and saying, actually, I need this, I need this, I need this in my life, rather than is this a real kind of thing with biomedical stuff on. Actually, it's a heuristic. It's a way of thinking about things that allows us to live flourishing lives. Yeah.
it
Uh,
allow it
Listen,
allows you. Sorry,
I,
Carol.
I didn't know about this until what 2 weeks ago when you told me about it for the first time, and it's been a really, really helpful tool about thinking about things. Thank you. You're a good mentor.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, no, I think, it creates a space where it's not high demand.
Nope.
And you can ask yourself the question, what kind of rest do I really need? And it
Mm,
allows you to then develop an understanding of what your needs are in a holistic way. It gets you into the habit of checking in with yourself. We always tell and advocate this to our students, but actually, as mentors, how much do we do this?
exactly. How do we look after ourselves so that we've got the resources to do what we do? We are
Absolutely.
about, well, we've just gone past the halfway mark of the 7 different kinds of rest. So we've done physical, mental, sensory, creative. What should we do next?
So we have emotional rest. Now, obviously, the talk was delivered with no specific context, but I read into that actually as mentors. If you don't have it at the start, that's okay because you will naturally develop this skill, I believe. I mean, I can't say that as a blanket policy, but I believe that you develop this skill. But actually, the courage to be authentic and say how you're really feeling will revolutionize your relationships with your students. Not to the point that you're projecting onto your students, but being honest, saying, do you know what, I'm a bit tired today. So if I ask you to repeat, if I ask you to repeat what you've just said, it's not because I'm not listening. It's having that courage to communicate your needs and say how you're really feeling. And I think this comes in, I mean, with the mental health mentoring, I very much know that you have to have regular supervision. Now, my business provides supervision for our mentors, but actually, as the self-employed mentor, there isn't,
No.
and on the autism side of things, there isn't that requirement for supervision. And actually, I think seeking that and investing in supervision, I think it's really, really important for your own emotional well-being, because sometimes you're dealing with really heavy things. Sometimes you're dealing with things that students haven't declared to anyone else, and you're the first person. And sometimes that can be really heavy, and that can be really draining. So it's important that you have got somebody perhaps external that you can run ideas by. And I think in the mentoring room at the moment, that's kind of missing. But I would like to think in the future that it perhaps becomes a feature. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud, but I think it would be really important that people are given that space to, to find the courage and be authentic and say where they're struggling, because it doesn't always happen.
Doesn't.
And
was going to say,
mentors aren't perfect. They're going to make mistakes sometimes, and they're not going to know the answer. Sometimes even their research doesn't provide them with the answer, but having another mentor to talk that through and normalize what they're feeling and understand, and come from a position of empathy, not sympathy.
And vulnerability.
Yeah, it's really important.
I had some amazing advice, and I will say it was last century when I started, not as a mentor, before my time as a mentor, when I was a teacher. And one of my teacher trainers, back in 1997, said, Brian, you have to be aware of your feelings when you go into the classroom, because feelings are contagious. If you don't know your own, you won't know what else is going around you. And so I started as a teacher, making sure that actually, if I had had a rubbish class and I was a bit cross, or the senior management had just been insufferable again, that I would take that anger into a classroom, but I'd be aware of it. So I'd go into my class and just say, oh, so sorry, Mr. Evans feeling a bit grumpy today. And they just go, oh yeah, all right, Mr. Evans. And it made me feel a lot better. And because I owned it, it got reflected back to me. I think this is doubly, triply, immeasurably true in the mentoring room when there's just two of you. And particularly with our autistic folks who have that high degree of heightened empathy. But actually, if you go into the mentoring room as a mentor and you're feeling sad, don't be worried if sadness gets reflected back to you. If you go in there with joy, joy will follow. If you go in there with, I don't know, existential ennui, that's a tricky one. I don't know who I am or what I am. Actually, you create those spaces around you. And when you do so, if you are open about it, if you are saying, I've had my emotional rest and I have come to you in a good place, you will be met in a good place.
Yeah.
That is really hard when there is an institution which creates stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
So actually, if we can take those things away, then we go in chilled, and it gets spread around and gives that space for us to talk about things. I love the idea of emotional rest. Can I ask you, what is emotional rest for you?
As I've sort of touched on, it's just being honest and being
Mm,
authentic. They're things at my core. It's a fine balance between, as I said earlier, between projecting
yeah,
and honesty. But I think it makes you a human
yeah.
and emotionally intelligent. And that's what, we're trying to encourage students to develop, is if they haven't already, and if they feel like they can't express something, is allowing them a space and leading by example, actually.
And that possibly, and maybe we'll come back and talk about it some other time, is the whole
Yeah.
idea of alexithymia.
Yeah.
Actually, there are a large proportion of people who can't access their emotional states as readily and need to learn through proxies about heart rate and breathing to work out where they are and what they are possibly feeling at any particular point. And then I think at the other case, there are people who are very, very aware of their feelings at all points. And actually, whether that becomes an overriding concern. It's finding these wonderful middle paths, maybe. We can only do that by chatting to other people. I don't think we can do it by ourselves. Yeah. We've done, oh, I'm going through the list again. This is like, what's his name's hats? I went to the shop and got, no, not hats. What's his name's shopping list? Terrible game. As I have very little memory games as a child were an absolute nightmare. But we've done physical, mental, sensory, creative, emotional, 2 more.
And we're on to social.
Social. Oh, social rest. That's a big one, isn't it?
I think we could do a whole episode on social
Yeah.
rest. But it's about, and I think this is again related to having, in the mentoring context, having that supervision, is being able to run things past other people that understand the weight of what you're feeling. But it's also balancing, in your personal life. Surround yourself with positive people. That's easier said than done in today's world. And in today's where everybody's demanded on 24/7, 7 days a week, that's harder to come by, but you have the power, in theory, to determine who you let absorb your energy, and likewise, who else's energy you absorb. And I think, again, in the self-employed capacity of specialist autism and ADHD mentoring, it can be quite a lonely place.
Yeah.
And it's important. And I think some of the bigger brands, certainly one of the bigger non-medical health providers that I work for, they've noticed that, and they've now created an online portal for all their mentors, study skills, to come together and just chat in a forum.
Yeah.
Which, is really, really important. And I think we might see a shift in the next couple of years with more of this happening. I wouldn't like to say how or when, but I think this shift about connectedness, and especially in a post-COVID world, most students want remote mentoring, which means there's going to be a lot more remote mentoring for mentors, which then in turn means that you could potentially be more isolated. It's about who you invest your energy in and how much others take from your energy. As I said, it's easier said than done to manage that, but I think it's really important to surround yourself with people that lift you up, inspire you, engage in conversations, have the heavy conversations with you. And I actually think perhaps that's more in a personal capacity more than a professional capacity, but I don't think that there's not room for that to happen, like an example where one of the companies I work for has a forum for that to happen. So I think that'll be an interesting phenomenon to watch over the next couple of years.
One of the fascinating things that is within that idea of social rest is that actually it's not hermitage. It's not a complete withdrawing into the wilderness. It's actually having the kind of good people in the way that you want. So actually, if it is an online forum, if it's a couple of text messages, it doesn't have to be that, right, I'm with a person, I've got to glob onto them sideways and stay with them just to get my social fix for the next 7 days. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about creating a sociality in which we do things our own way that leaves us refreshed, topped up, ready to go on, because we've been able to share the big things.
I think what I like actually the most about the 7 types of rest is none of it's about stopping or putting a halt on anything. It's about adapting, it's about adjustment, it's about accommodations, it's about mindfulness, all the things that I love, which is possibly why I identify with this model so much, is it makes you check in with what you need as a professional.
And I love this whole idea, rest isn't just stopping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stopping has its place, particularly if something is being nasty and toxic. But actually, good rest is an active process. So the last one, and this one, if at this point you're listening and you want to fast forward, we're going to do a few minutes on spiritual rest. I think it's very important, but I also think spirituality is one of those really badly understood concepts. It can get a little bit woo-woo. So we're going to try and avoid woo-woo and do the spirituality. So, Lucy, spiritual rest.
So, as the term spirit would suggest,
Mm.
prayer, meditation. But for me, spiritual rest is journaling, inner reflection, you know, connecting with people that are interested in my hobbies, people that are, you know, that love the things, love the hobbies I love to spend time, have the same kind of morals and ethics and things. It's just connectedness. It doesn't mean spiritual in a religious sense. It can be that if that applies to you, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But actually, it's not just spiritual rest in the sense of religion and the practice. It's the mindful process. It is, acting prayer, having those conversations, meditating, journaling, communicating with other people that you have common ground in. They're all spiritual things that are I look at spiritual rest as food for your soul. So not food in the sense, it's the spiritual food. For every person that will look different, but without that spiritual food, I don't believe you can actually, although it's number 7, I actually think it should be higher up. I don't actually think you can live your best life if you don't have some kind of soul food in your world, in your lifestyle. So yeah, I quite like it.
Yeah, to unpack this. So this is where I have to say that originally my first degree was in theology, of all things, before I came around to all these kind of other stuff. And actually comparative theologies, comparative religion, I was actually an RE teacher at one point and taught many of the world's faiths. And one of the big sociologies of religion talks about spirituality as a connection with the greater.
Yeah.
And that greater can be your community. It can be when you start to advocate for people who are in the similar situations to yourself. It could be using a divine thing as a proxy for, well, loving everybody. And it is that connection to that greater ideal, that greater similarity of humanity, which can be incredibly empowering. And it is accessed in many different ways by many different people doing many different things. But it is always about that. How do we stand with that that is bigger than us? And if we can get our heads around that, that is a rest in its own right.
But also remember, Brian, that actually spiritual rest could be your own self-growth through
It is, well,
meditation, reflection.
see, for me, that is connecting to our humanity.
Yeah.
So we grow as humans because we find connected to our own humanity, and we do that through meditation. Interestingly, you also mentioned ethics. Maybe this is just a Brian bugbear. I like meditation. I like the development of resilience, but that is only applicable if there is an ethic that tries to make the world a better place. There's no point meditating just to let the world pass by. You meditate so you have that rest, that recuperation, so that we can bring change to the world. And we do that through a strong ethical background. I could be wrong. That's just one of the Brian's grumbliness about, ooh, do this meditation and the world will be great again. No, do the meditation so you can make the world great again.
It's interesting. Perhaps we could do a whole episode on sorts of meditation, because there are many different.
Oh, very much so.
There's definitely a science to meditating.
Yeah.
But no, I absolutely hear what you're saying. It's about that reset so that you can put good energy out into the world. And quite often that's not acknowledged. So yeah, definitely hear you on that one.
I have really enjoyed looking at these 7 forms of rest. It seems holistic. It seems very human. It seems something that as mentors we should be doing, and we should be perhaps using it as a way of thinking about rest for the mentees that we see. There is something about the primacy of rest. Just to sort of wrap up, Lucy, what happens when rest doesn't happen?
But burnout happens. And that's irrespective of being neurodivergent. It will happen a lot sooner if you're neurodivergent, but burnout happens to everybody. And if you don't rest, it's going to snowball and you're going to feel worse. And I've learned that lesson the hard way, finally.
It's that snowballing. There is a interesting paper about it by Kajan McMenny, Burnout and Dropping Out. And it looks at autistic and non-autistic students during COVID. And it did find that our autistic students were more likely to be burning out. And there is, maybe it's just my hunch from working with students during that time, there was that non-rest of being at home. But actually for students who were potentially living outside of the home environment, there are their own little spaces where they can retreat to. And actually maybe sometimes, particularly if you are a young adult, your home with parents isn't the most chill place, that your parents have expectations on you that actually gets in the way of rest. So yeah, think about that one. There's also particularly ADHD and burnout. It does seem burning bright and burning hard does seem to go alongside that. So we're going to have another chat at some point about ADHD in particular, I think, and things like that. 2 minutes on sleep. We all need sleep. Is sleep rest?
Not if it's not good sleep. Not if it's not you've got good sleep hygiene. Not if you're not meeting your body's basic needs.
One of my personal rules, which I had to really pick up during the lockdown and stuff because I was terrible for it, I'd start scrolling on my phone at 4:30 in the morning. I've had to move my phone to another place. It
Sleep
cannot be
hygiene
next to me.
is so key. It's hard though to apply. I always say to students, if you're going to start updating your sleep hygiene, do one thing at a time. Don't try and do it all at the same time because it becomes overwhelming, too demanding, and therefore unsustainable. But actually, the phone, screens, limiting an hour before bed, the blue light. I mean, even with my glasses on, I've started actually reading before bed and I just get much better sleep. But perhaps, again, maybe we'll do another podcast actually on sleep and the importance of that.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And these podcasts, I find them incredibly useful. I hope everybody who's listening finds them incredibly useful. To wrap it all up, I just have to say thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Brian.
Now, if you have questions, we'd love to hear them at neuromentoringpodcast@gmail.com.
This has been Neuromentoring. Be brilliant.